All right. Hey, AI is making life easier for people who already are mobile. But what if technology could restore what injury or disease took away? Today, we're talking with Dr. Nitesh Kumar, CEO, founder of MoveHx, about the future of mobility and human potential. Dr. Nitesh, how are you?
Good, good. Thank you for having me, John. How are you doing?
Awesome, my friend. Well, look, we know each other a little bit off camera and excited to kind of see the journey that you've been on. And I know my audience and the GO4CEO community would love to hear kind of that beginning part, right? Tell us a little bit about your story so that we can kind of understand how you got to move HX and this journey you're about to take on. And I know it's kind of fairly new, but the grinder beginning stages are so cool, but it also comes back from a foundational standpoint of who you are, what you've been able to build, your parents, all that type of stuff. So tell us a little bit about background for now.
Yeah, so I'm Chicago based. I'm a first generation college student in America, first generation doctor in the family. My journey kind of started when I immigrated when I was 10 years old. Went to middle school here in Chicago, went to college in Chicago, did my undergrad at Illinois Wesleyan, did my MD at Windsor University, and then I did my MBA at Davenport in Michigan. So got all those accolades for getting the capability to do this job, right? So what are my requirements and how did I ended up being in the CEO role? So it's kind of interesting because you kind of go through schooling, kind of learn everything, and then put it in practice. So I'm a big believer in see one, do one, and teach one kind of thing. So that's where it all started.
You know, and you're right. It's interesting, right? From your perspective, who has a long academic journey, doesn't necessarily always teach you right how to be ready to be a CEO of a company. But you know, from what I know and our dealings with each other, I know that you've always been kind of in a leadership role. So tell us a little bit, you know, at the hospital that you were at just recently, you know, some of those dynamics that have now prepared you for some of the impact that you're making at Move HX.
I think that was the most foundational base building role that I ever had. And I say that because I was in post-acute care in an LTAC in an inpatient rehab. And it also had a CBRF. So it had multitude of services to offer to patients. But the way the LTAC is, they're very limited throughout the US. In Wisconsin, there's only four of them. What they are is long-term acute care hospital. So we have acute care hospital, which could be level one trauma center that has 350 beds, doing revenue in magnitude of $2 billion a year, such as Condell Medical Center in Chicago or Freighted Medical Center in Wisconsin, which are level one trauma centers. Being at a LTAC in a post-acute care, which is a long-term acute care hospital, in a role of director of business development and a TBI specialist, traumatic brain injury specialist, what that allowed me to do is kind of learn from every single department first and then contribute to every single department with the knowledge that I've gained in school, doing the MBA, running the financials. So it was really cool. I spent 4 years there and kind of learned everything. I always wanted to run a hospital when I was growing up. I thought MD, becoming a doctor, was a way to do it. But then later I realized the doctors are the furthest thing away from the administration. It's kind of like a number, right? In US, the administration is strictly handled by professional business people. And where I'm from India, it's doctors running the hospitals, right?
Mm.
Because they're the kind of leaders and they're the front line, as well as the department heads and running the P&Ls. But in United States, it's very much different. And I learned that once I was in practice and kind of, doing the job. So
So interesting. You know, that background and that philosophy, right, of cultures is so interesting, right? What you bring, what you brought from another country, and even though you were still young, I'm sure that your parents laid a foundation and the work ethic and the things that they really inspired you to be. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of just that dynamic, right? Because even at 10, you still had some foundational things that you brought from your
and
experiences from another country. So tell us a little bit about that just to go a little bit deeper.
And I remember my childhood vividly, right? Like I still remember the days in India. My friends are still there. We connect all the time on social media nowadays, right? LinkedIn, Instagram. So the thing is, the culture, I think it's the biggest profound thing in my life that has built me to where I am today because work ethic, right? So my dad worked 9 to 9, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week, no days off. And that was in India. And that's what it is like for most people in third world countries. They don't have 4 to 5 days work week schedule. And once you put this online, I might get some um, pushback on this, but that's what it takes to be successful in third world countries or make money or provide for the family. They don't have the luxury of working 4 to 5 days. So I thought that was normal. And then when my parents got here, they continued the same trajectory because that's what they thought was normal, right? Like I never had a question in my mind when I was doing track and field in high school and I was the varsity from freshman year, right? Which means like I was really good and I was winning races. Never saw my parents in the stands, and I never questioned that because that's what I was used to, not having parents
Mm,
around, but doing the job I was meant to do because I knew what it took to have a successful future, right? Same with my sister. I had one sibling. Same kind of work ethic I see, working day and night because that's what got embedded in it. So now I have 3 children, right? I have twin boys and a girl. And I want to be around, but at the same time, you have to instill those work ethic, those values at an early age that you have to work hard to get somewhere in life and smart, right? So there's this big swing these days that you can become a TikTok star and the enrollment college rates are down, right? The retention is not there, and those are going to impact workforce performance in next 5 years. It's already here, right? You see the biggest shortage is doctors and lawyers. If you
mm.
do a national poll survey, who is going to treat us when we are elderly, right? In 2035, 2040s, what does the workforce look like? We are very hung up on technology now, the AI and the artificial intelligence that they might come in and do the coding and things like that, but we're not there yet. So raises a good question.
No. Well, yeah, look, I mean, obviously society has ebbs and flows, right? And it's so cool that you have that background from a third world country, but, not so much third world anymore, in my opinion, right? My wife actually went to India for about 90 days. She was doing some transitional things with a big, large insurance company. And man, the people, if I'm not mistaken, that Asian Pacific, area, Eastern, all that type of stuff are the highest income earners in America right now. So you guys are not so, not so third world in my opinion. But and I've got some great friends in here in Naperville, Illinois, and just some really great minds and innovators and strategists and things that are happening. So I think that's the cool thing about America too, is like the cultural blend of people that are around here, so that you're all learning from each other, and we broke some bread together as well. So, all right, look, you were leading this hospital. I know that you had some scenarios happen, and all of a sudden, we met for lunch, and you tell me about this new opportunity. And to be honest, like it was hard to comprehend a little bit, but then I researched MoveHx, and man, the things that you guys are doing, the incredible human elements that you're, changing, just like in my intro. Can you tell us what happened, right? So you leave the hospital. What are the first two or three things that you started thinking and connections that you made to look to come over to MoveHx as the CEO?
So, once you get to this level, this point, once you have some hospital experience, you start getting pitches like, "Oh, startup companies, will you join our board? Will you join our company? Will you lead our company?" So now I really started thinking, what is the next thing I really want to do and put my 100% focus and bandwidth behind that I would be comfortable doing and seeing the vision. To give you an idea, one of my friends is a retina specialist, so he restores vision for life, right? That's his
Mm.
thing. What do? You restore vision for life. So I'm questioning that to myself. What is it that drives me? What is the impact that I'm making in the world? And so my direct background, the hospital I was just at, it had an inpatient rehab, it had a long-term acute care hospital. So it was very post-acute care focused. The goal was to move patients from acute to post-acute care and then home, right? for mobility, for practicality, to go back into the community and do the jobs they could do for the patients that could. So when the MoveHx opportunity presented, and I was weighing my options. I had another company that I was kind of interested in, but then it came back to serving the patients, right? Why did I get a medical degree and then an MBA if I'm not going to be dealing with patient population at all, or making a human difference in mobility or in their life in some way or form? So those are the questions that I asked myself, and the answer was crystal clear. There wasn't even a doubt that this is the next thing when it landed. Sometimes when you have faith, God looks out for you, and I pray on that, that God guide me on doing the right thing and making the right choice. So when it presented, I didn't have a doubt in my mind how I would lead it or how tough it would be. The question was, I can do this based on my background, based on connections I have with 100+ hospitals in past years, and case managers, and the people that I know at the hospital. The question became is how I'm going to do it and how successful I'm going to be, right? It wasn't like, oh, am I going to struggle? Because everybody struggles, right? Those becomes into opportunities that we have to tackle to get to the point where we want to be.
Yeah. No, you lay the foundation there, right? And I'm glad that you took some time to be introspective, right? In my book, I talk about assessing, right? It's the first level that you have to be at to then go to the sequence that you're about to go through, right? And if you're not assessing where you're at, you're actually taking a step too far in the process, right? So it's really cool that you took that time, and sometimes you have to act quickly, right? Obviously, you're making a good income, and all of a sudden you're not, and then you still have bills, and you have your kids, and some challenges, and your wife, and is she scared, and and all that type of stuff. So there's a lot of things that come into question, but really interesting that you saw MoveHx as the place to lay your hat on and start to build something. So I think it's been what, a couple months now, or a few 3 months.
Yep.
Okay, so you've moved into this role. If I am correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've got equity in the business. You're the CEO of the company. You're driving strategy, driving business development, as you did in some parts with the hospital. What are some of the things that you're doing on a daily basis as a routine, as a must do to be able to accomplish some of the goals that you're already hitting?
Nurturing the leads, making sure that our vision is aligned with the work that we're doing, following up with the hospitals, making sure we're filling in the gap that needs to be filled in providing quality care, which that means is, targeting post-acute care channels, which is inpatient rehabs, LTACs, skilled nursing facilities, residential living facilities, on mobility, right? We have elderly population, but we also have patients that unfortunately go through motor vehicle accidents or trauma happens, and now they need rehab in terms of spine care, hip, knee, shoulders, stroke victims, right? So how can we come in and make their quality of life better so that they can go home and continue their life at home?
Hmm. So in and of itself, for so people know what MoveHx is doing. So are these kind of frames or skeleton type things that go around your body, or what? Give us a little bit more knowledge on
So
the product side of things.
yeah, so the movehx.com is the website. This product's up there. Some of them are mechanical, which has no automation, no robotic component, such as like one is called a life glider. It's a high-tech wheelchair that prevents falls,
Hmm.
but you can also stand and walk. So it's like a walking, um, standing wheelchair with a seat in it. But you can also stand up, and there's a belt that goes around it, so you can walk and not fall. Because one of the biggest risk factors in the hospital is falls.
Mm.
That also count against the hospital and count against the whole CMS, Center for Medicare Services criteria. Um, so that's a non-mobile device, but we are also focused on no, sorry, non robotic device, but we are also focused on the robotic device, which is robotic exoskeletons, and that's where I really get excited to talk about those things, because that's bridging technology with things that we couldn't do before. So, paraplegic patient that had a complete cord injury, right, at in the thoracic, and now can't use legs at all. you can put those patients in robotic exoskeletons and have them walk again, depending on what kind of robotic exoskeleton it is. So some of them are fully like a suit that you can put on your legs, like neck down, right? And it has like a wire attached to the top base where it can help you walk again, right? And some of these patients haven't moved in 5 years, 7 years from wheelchair to bed, and they get bed sores, they get wounds, right? And then those have to be managed. So this allows us to take some pressure off from mobility prospect, but also allows their legs to kind of move with circulation, preventing deep vein thrombosis or other kind of comorbidities that can happen. So
It's interesting. You made me think, and I hadn't thought about this. I have a gentleman that I know pretty well in the real estate space, successful guy. His son, unfortunately, had one of these accidents where he became a paraplegic. He was diving off of kind of a lake house type thing and dove into a little bit of a river lake, and he didn't realize wasn't as deep as it should have been or whatever, and lost his mobility. So I'm thinking like how amazing you're in a space to take his son, who has lost all mobility, and now could put something around his body. And it's exactly that. I think it's been 7 or 10 years since he's been able to move that way. And what an incredible joy that would bring to the family, to the kid himself, right? That now is older, and these types of things. So, man, what about? I mean, talk about impact and things that you'll be doing as you grow MoveHx. So the complexity of the business itself, you guys are truly manufacturing this, or are you representing and creating distribution channels for these products that you have relationships with? What's the dynamic of that?
right now it's a distribution channel. I'm in the midst of, we also have an R&D, research and development leg, right? And I'm working on acquiring upper mobility exoskeleton that I'm excited about. And I actually received it this week to test it out. So kind of excited and see where that leads. The goal is to have our own warehouse and do our whole manufacturing, but that comes with having revenue in place where we are comfortable doing that. So as a CEO, one thing is that you report to the board, strategic advisors and board, and you have to make sure that the numbers are there and also the vision aligns with the bigger company's vision, right? So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's definitely obviously this isn't kids play, right? It's definitely something that's very serious, and in anything, right? There's tons of startups out there in different areas of industries right now, and unfortunately, most of them will fail from a statistical standpoint. But what makes the difference is the right team together. And from what I know, you've shared that your team is very strong. And what's one of the things that you saw when you looked into MoveHx? And then also the people that you've surrounded yourself, if you can talk about the team around you right now and how you feel comfortable in that sense moving forward.
yeah, so my strategic advisors, they're well versed and experienced as VC capitalists, venture capitalists, and investors. So they invest in multitude of companies. This is not the only one, but this is the only one for me as a CEO to lead, right? So I'm excited about that because that creates open bandwidth to implement strategies that I want to implement to get to the profitable P&L. But at the same time, my investors, my strategic board is there to advise me when I skew away from the daily drivers of the business, right? Which means is holding me accountable to make sure that I'm doing the task that is going to make us uh, stick around for long term. But at the same time, also keep me accountable and making sure that we are serving the mission. For me, it is patient outcomes and making sure that patients are being served and the quality of life is being improved with the products that we're bringing on. So that means, putting them in testing, making sure
12 o'clock.
they're safe to use, things like that. But what the board allows is the capital, right? Without their support, I wouldn't be here. And then the second thing is the strategy, because they have done this before. They have connections, they can pool teammates from other businesses per se and kind of lend them to me and see if it works for me. And if I want to keep them around, then I can keep them around. So it's kind of like having a greater oversight as a corporation, just having these investors around. So
Okay. So Nate, in some ways, you have a bit of a fractional team that has this unique expertise, but you're leading and spearheading the BD, the day to day, those types of things. So, what is the ideal client right now? Is it more of an offshoot outpatient thing, acute hospital? Like, what can you tell us a little bit about? I guess you have this 100+ network that you'd mentioned earlier. How are you approaching that, and who's kind of the ideal client that makes sense for MoveHx to be a provider or vendor for?
Right. So, right now I'm very heavily focused on B2B, business to business. So that means inpatient rehabs, community-based residential living facilities, because that's where the most of the patient population is that requires assistance with mobility. So, for instance, right, inpatient rehab, you don't have to technically have a motor vehicle accident or a bigger trauma. Sometimes it's just elderly population that got weaker at home because they didn't move around much, but they have no tools. They don't even have a wheelchair or a walker, or
Mm,
forget about the bigger exoskeletons, like the ones that are making paraplegic patients move. They don't have basic life gliders, like I said, right? Manual, kind of like a walker, but also like helps you sit down when you're tired and things like that. So when they're going to rehab, they're getting 3 weeks of rehab and then they're going back home. But in that 3 weeks, they are there 5 days a week. Saturday, Sunday is not counting. 5 days a week, they're getting physical therapy, occupational therapy, 2 to 3 times, well, if they're inpatient, they're getting 5 times a week, but it's only an hour, right? So just having these devices where you're safe to move around on your own and you're not going to fall will make the biggest difference, right? Sometimes if you look at the inpatient rehab data from CMS, these patients are having falls because they're not ringing the bell or not trying to get any help in order to go to bathroom. If you have one of those life
mm,
gliders in the room where they can stand up on their own with the assistance device and kind of buckle themselves in, there's no way that they can fall, right? And then
mm,
buckle themselves, use the toilet if they need to, wash their hands, and then kind of come back to their seat. So sometimes these patients are mobile enough, but they're mobile, but they're not mobile enough they're weak in essence, right? So they need assistance with devices, and that's where we come in. A lot of hospitals and inpatient rehabs don't have these. They just have a wheelchair. So the patient is getting up and sometimes not even getting in the wheelchair because it's kind of hard to like move your hands to move the wheels if you're not used to it. What the live glider does, it you just stand and you walk, and it walks with you because there's a belt
mm,
around you. So, and then the other thing is like robotic exoskeletons. They can be used in acute care hospital to post-acute, which is LTAC or inpatient rehab. So there's different levels of robustness in these robotic exoskeletons. Depending on the severity of the injury, you will use one or the other. So there can be a continuum of using these devices until you go home. And once you're home, if you still feel like you're not fully rehabbed or you're paraplegic, and this one of these devices will help you at home, then you can contact us and we can make sure it's fitted, do the service that we need to, and get you equipped with the right device to go home.
mm. So there's a B2B component, like you said, right, to the hospitals and to these outpatient and inpatient scenarios. So how does it work that let's say they want to engage with you guys, right? Oh man, your products they're amazing, Dr. Nitesh, and MoveHx could be a vendor of ours for. So what does that look like in the steps of being able to set that hospital up, and who are you billing? Who's paying for this? Is it the patient? Do you have a lease program? Are you guys supplying all these tools and then having them rent it from you? Like, what is the actual dynamic of cash flow in that scenario to make sure that obviously they could use these tools?
Yeah, so we have a B2C, consumer model. That's a website online. Basically, head of marketing kind of deals with that and let that to her. So that's like consumers can go buy right online, have calls to get it fitted and kind of go from there. But where I come in, I'm focused on business to business. So healthcare sales is different. It's not like selling a product, right? You go, if you want a car, you look at the car online and you go in and you buy a car. In healthcare, you can't do that as a business because risk management is huge. You need to make sure the product is safe, right? And then you're going to figure out the financing, who's paying for it, like you said. Some of these products are FDA approved and some of them are consumer graded, right? So they don't have to go through the FDA channel. The consumer can just buy it right out, but the hospitals don't want to touch it because there's no label on it, right? So you kind of walk into this territory thinking, oh, these sales are going to be quick. And that's what my investors thought, that these sales are going to be quick. They are a nurture relationship, very much so a pilot, I call it, right? So you have to run a pilot. First, you have to gauge interest, and they want to know why should we implement your device? What is it doing for us? So I have to have data to back that up, clinical studies or publications that show that this device decreases length of stay in inpatient rehab by 3 days, or it reduces falls by 35%. And all that facts take time to accumulate. So when you're like a startup company, sometimes it can be very tough to having all those facts in place, because some of these studies can be 6 to 8 months or a year, right? To collect that data at different institutions and then kind of pull them together and then publish them. Publications itself can take 2 to 3 months. So the B2B channel is tough because A, you have to nurture your leads. B, you have to prove your concept and prove your device that it's working and why they should implement that. And then it comes to funding it, right? So who's paying for it? There's a pilot model where they can test it out, which is a lease, and then convert it over if they're interested into a full write-out purchase, and the service will go through MoveHx, the setup and the distribution. And we can also do automation workflows where it fits in your current day to day. So another thing is physical therapy and occupational therapy. These are healthcare providers, and as you know, there's a big shortage in healthcare workforce. So when you implement these devices, you can cut your therapy time, by at least 3 to 4 days if you're implementing these devices, because patients are getting better quicker, so they can discharge home quicker. And that's what the Center of Medicare Services wants to see, that data. The focus is shifting towards value-based care instead of volume, right? So once you put emphasis on value, the quality, that's where these products really make a difference, because the payout from Medicare doesn't change. For one patient, you might get $35,000 for inpatient rehab. That is not going to change if you discharge a patient in a week or 3 weeks. So it's actually profitable for inpatient rehabs to discharge them in a week, but they have to be mobile, their functional scores have to be there, and that's how that data is tracked.
Hmm. Yeah, actually I was thinking that as you were sharing that. I'm like, okay, well, there's a dichotomy here, right? Shouldn't wouldn't the hospital kind of want them to stay longer so they could bill more, in a sense, right? But I think you solved that in my mind there. So interesting stuff. And yeah, you're right, right? In this new position, you're sharing true benefits that impact the organization from a bottom line perspective, right? In most of those things, and then obviously the high end value is that the patient is getting new mobility features and being able to exercise and go out there and have a little bit more freedom in their life and stuff, which is such a big impact. But there is that yin yang, I guess, in a way, right? So, all right. So now on your day to day, obviously, you've had your network, you've got this team around you that have had investor quality knowledge, board perspective, these types of aspects. How much of a team did you inherit? And then also, what type of talent are you looking for right now as you are in this growth phase?
So the team, basically I started from scratch. Like I had a team of maybe 3 people, but now it's growing. So the what I'm looking for is um liaison, right? Somebody that can bridge the relationship between B2B, from our product to inpatient rehab facilities, or sales representative that can call the places and follow up on those devices and what we have to offer, and if that fits with their model, or would they like a pilot, right? Kind of like taking the day-to-day heavy burden off of me, so I can follow strategically on developing relationships and nurturing the relationships that I already have. I think that would be crucial. Like I said, sometimes it's places don't know what's out there, right? This is such a new space and a big space. Yeah, we heard about robotic exoskeletons last 10 years, but they were not capable of what they are able to do today, right? Like it's like ChatGPT. When it started around 2020, we weren't thinking about agents, right? Now we are thinking about agentic AI, and you're thinking about a whole company around it where you don't really have to hire people because agents will do a lot of work. So now we're getting to the point where we don't need in home health three people going in to lift a person when we can implement these robotic exoskeletons and put them in, and we can still have one physical therapist or whatever that looks like, 1 to 2 people instead of like having 4 or 5 people for 300-pound patient in a home just to get them up.
Mhm. Wow, what that's another area that interesting because I have some home healthcare business clients that have that battle, right? And they have their own talent resources that are shortening and people wanting to be in that business or have that type of be able to do that job, right? So interesting stuff. So look, you left a role that then complexity brought you into this and inspiration and the right connections that you have. You've taught us a little bit about kind of what your day to day looks like and what you're pursuing, and then obviously you just shared the type of talent that can kind of be plugged in to help you build this company. So marketing wise, obviously there's a difference between brand, marketing, and sales. What are some things that you've already caught on to that maybe move HX, just like doing this podcast, right? Marketing, right, and branding. What are some things that you're learning that can kind of bring a little bit more significance into the marketplace and brand awareness?
Yeah, so we have a head of marketing. She's great. She has a bachelor's in marketing, and she's been doing this for a long time. So she runs the SEO, pages, e-commerce, automation, and all those things are very relevant in today's world. Digital marketing, I would say. And then she's also working on collaterals and files and folders from very basic level to like high performance of running automation, client automated follow-ups, things like that. So I think in marketing department, we feel very good about it because we have her and she's kind of taking the whole lead and running the channels and distribution on that end. But as a CEO, I have accountability, right? So accountability is the biggest thing in this job. Making sure that people are doing what they're doing and say what they're going to do. So follow up. But as a CEO, you have to be accountable about every single department because you are where the buck stops, right?
Mhm.
So you have to kind of make sure that you understand marketing, you understand e-commerce, you understand shipping. Are the products being received by the patients on time? Is somebody following up for a feedback? What kind of a feedback are we getting? Satisfaction surveys, things like that to make sure that we are heading in the right space. You can have 10 good sales, but if one of them goes bad and one of them those patients review leaves a 1 star rating out of 5, those 10 sales won't matter because people will look at one sale and that would also skew your average star rating to 3.5 maybe. So you have to be very mindful of those things, and that's where the strategy comes in play. But like you said, um, I have a head of marketing that I confide in, and she's phenomenal, and I leave it that to be because as a CEO, I also have to make sure I trust, but I also verify. So
Hmm. Yeah, inspect what you expect, as they say. Uh, awesome stuff. So, obviously, over the next 6 to 12 months, some things will, be very dynamic and fluid for you. What are, 3 or 4 things that you're kind of looking on the horizon? Is it product? Is it, supply and demand, right, within what you currently have and kind of raising the bar on efficiency and effectiveness into your products into these services into these places. What are maybe 2 or 3 things that you're looking at for the next 6 to 12 months?
So number one thing is product delivery. That I'm very focused on kind of like growing the company, and that can't happen without the P&L, right? So I'm making sure that we are reaching out, we are making connections, we are running pilots, and and kind of showing our data to the hospitals, to the inpatient rehabs, to getting our footprint out there. The second thing I'm very, very excited about is, like I said, we are looking at this new tech for upper mobility exoskeleton that we are going to start testing this next week. And I'm excited because if we can acquire that, then the trajectory of the company will change from a e-commerce standpoint to having something of our own, right? And that's what I look forward to. But overall vision is to grow this company and in a CEO role, lead you to somewhere where it's on the platform. It's already there in the robotic exoskeleton market, like you can see online. But I would like it to be a key major player that we have vendor relationships at every single level one trauma center to home health service.
I love it. I love it. Well, look, it's exciting to have you on because I think over the next 6 to 18 months, it'll be cool to have you back on and kind of see the momentum, the growth, the trajectory that you're headed. If you think about, the leadership, you mentioned one chief marketing officer. What other people are you targeting just, in the 18 things that you're juggling, from a talent standpoint? Are there any other kind of C-suite-ish or middle level people that you feel are key and essential to the next 6 to 12 months growth? So the talent that you're looking at for MoveHx.
I think it's very important to give opportunity to the people that are within in the company. So like if somebody is a sales rep and they do a phenomenal job, they should be promoted to director level and a chief sales officer or chief business officer. And that's how I grew, right? So I started as a clinical liaison when I was young. And before that, I was a pharmacy tech when I was in undergrad days, right? And then you keep growing, you do a good job. People notice that. Believe it or not, C-suites is always noticing that. People think there's usually a disconnect where we are not watching. We're watching everything because everything gets
Mm-hmm.
from frontline operator to somebody's sitting in the C-suite. There's very heavily we're watching what's going on and we're very well aware. So I think it's a key to grow people internally. So like you said, um, as a startup, I get excited because the opportunities are endless, right? But the failures are there too. So if you don't execute, you will fail. But I love startups. I like to be in startup space because if you're performing and you're driven, you're committed, and you're doing what needs to be done, the scope is endless, right? Like you said, equity is there. Bonuses can be there when you're making sales. So, like I gave you one example for sales, but the other one is feedback, right? Patient satisfaction survey. So, like a chief people's officer would be another role at some point where we are collecting that data, and making sure that we're following with our patients, we're nurturing those leads. So, as the company grows, we get warehouses, we get more mobility products. CEO can focus on new acquisitions.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. From the new acquisition standpoint, right now the capital has been like, hey, there's a certain burn rate, right? I'm assuming that they have you a targeted to. Anything from the acquisition side, it sounds like the new products coming in, you're about to test it this week. Is that more of a vendor that has newly come to you, a new product within your same product line? What's the dynamic on that?
So interesting. So as a CEO, I have been establishing relationships, right? So we have a new couple vendor products that are coming in that I'm testing, but also, like I said, stuff that is been in R&D, like in clinical research for 10 years. I'm getting my
Mm,
hands on those, and without the MD, that probably wouldn't be possible, right? Because you really need to understand the technical uh, jargon behind it, mechanism of action. Like for example, if somebody had a stroke and they can't move their arm, right? Now we're testing this device. What is the mechanism and why are we acquiring it? So if there's a hand robotic exoskeleton, what part of the brain is it targeting? What sensors are being implemented at what wave frequency that it targets the thalamus in the brain? What kind of lobe? Frontal lobe, temporal lobe. So these are the learnings, right? That these are the key fundamentals. Having someone like me in this role would opens up the gate for investigative territory as well as currently utilizing the products and making sure that we are backing up what we are saying they do, right? And kind of assessing them.
I love it. I love it. Well, Dr. Nitesh, it's been inspiring to break bread with you and get to know you over the last probably year or so. I think we've been connecting. We initially were talking about some other avenues that I can help in the finance space, right? And then you pivoted to this role, and we had lunch and really got the chance to learn. And so cool for you to have this opportunity to be on the podcast, share the MoveHx story and what you're doing as CEO. As we end the interview, we like to go through what's called CEO, right? So go for CEO. So C is client experience, and all these connections, the hospitals, the outpatient, inpatient, home healthcare places that you're dealing with, the other CEOs and founders that you're influencing. What would you say to them in a 30, 60-second time frame as a value proposition now? What that looks like from a client experience if they do business with MoveHx.
So the patient outcomes is our number one priority, like I said in the starting of this, discussion. And that still stands the same. We are here to serve people. We are here to serve patients, make their mobility better, improve their quality of life. And that only happens when you test out new things. So, right, and make sure those things are safe. And that's what we're doing on the background, making sure things are safe, making sure they're working. And next, we're looking for patients or people that we can implement those products in to make their quality of life better. What would it take for someone that hasn't gone outside on a summer day and walk with their loved one to the park to see the kids swinging on the swings, right? And that can be profound for someone that hasn't done that in the last 5 years. And
Mm.
that's what the vision is here is improving quality of life and giving patients freedom that they lost due to an unfortunate event in their life.
That's awesome. Very impactful. So the middle question here is E for engagement, and I'm always super interested because everybody's different. I always get a different answer. If you think about engagement from Dr. Nitesh, who you are, the individual that you have become throughout your life, right? How do you like to engage? Is it breaking bread and doing dinner, lunch, breakfast, something like that? Is it going to an event? Is it bringing people to your home, to an office? Is it one-on-one conversations with your CMO? Like, how should people look at Dr. Nitesh and who you are as the individual to engage with you? What's the best way to do that?
I think breaking bread is if I break bread with you, I already like you, right? So like if I'm buying you dinner or if you're buying me dinner, we are past the surface level conversation, right? We have interest, we mutual interests that we share. And we're just getting to know each other that is this the right fit to do business together now, right? To move that conversation to the next level. And I think that stands true in mostly all the businesses. But as clinician, as somebody that's leading the company, tends to be a heavy schedule some days, packed with meetings. So having a virtual meeting a couple of the times before we can move or find a time to sit down and eat together would be great. But like you said, for us, it took how many calls, how many text messages, right, before we got to a point where we sat down and broke bread together. So I think it's important to kind of nurture your lead in terms of, giving them more time. But once you feel like you have mutual interest, that's when you should really take part in that engagement.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. All right, my friend. Operational excellence. Yeah, I'm sure you've had to quickly understand, how to move things, CRMs, things that you guys have internally, maybe some ERO stuff, or are you using entrepreneurial operating systems, EOS, like these types of things you have to learn quickly if you haven't had some of the knowledge as a CEO. But what are two or three things that you guys are using at MoveHX that's differentiating the way that you operationally do things?
I am very data analytics based, so I like to see data, but that I also like to keep that human factor in mind, which is you can't assess qualitative patient interactions or patient surveys or feedback in a quantitative manner. But when you're making decisions, when you're going in front of the board, you need to have that data in place. So even in my hospital role, I implemented CRMs, and then I brought on EMR, electronic medical record, ValSky based referral systems that would track initial referral to conversion, which means like all the middle processes of call outs, emails, uh, why did we lose this patient, what we could have done differently, right? And then could we serve this patient? Do we have all the services in place? equipment in place, medications in place. Sometimes it was just a simple barrier of not having uh, the right patient population, right? So at MoveHx, we did the same, have a CRM, we have a lead tracker, and then obviously we keep an eye on our P&L every day. So
Nice, nice, awesome. Well, Doc, thanks so much for coming on the GoFCO channel. It's really inspiring what you're doing. Obviously, the change is not so much different, but just kind of a pivot right into this other world that you are creating such impact with what you had already done in your practice as an MD in the hospital and all the things that you were doing already. And now your network gets to nurture even more some of the other ways that you can kind of bring great solutions to. So, what is the best way to get a hold of you? As you said, you're very busy in startup mode and grinding and moving along. But what are some of the best ways that if someone sees this and goes, man, I want to really engage with MoveHx, I'd like to, contact Dr. Nitesh as the CEO. What are some of those best ways to do that?
movehx.com, contact us. I am very much hands-on LinkedIn. I know I've sent you a couple messages here and there, and you have sent me the same. So if there's ever anything that patients have questions on, or customers or hospitals, they can directly LinkedIn message me, and I respond the same day. So I check it frequently.
Awesome, my friend. Well, hey, Go Show community, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, there's quite a few of you that don't subscribe. So hit the subscribe channel. All right. Tell your friends about this community and this growth. Also, check out my book, The 4A Formula, Untangle Any Challenge and Think Like a CEO, available on Amazon. And reach out to MoveHX. I already thought of a friend of mine, as I said earlier in the interview, a gentleman that had his 13-year-old boy jump into a lake or river and unfortunately become paraplegic. And now Dr. Nitesh's company could make a humongous difference in that person's life. So, really, really cool stuff. And keep on spreading the word of Go4CEO. We interview CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, and intrapreneurs alike to really bring you the real stories of what they're doing to make impact and do some real good things in the marketplace. So, thanks, Doc.
Thank you, John. You have a good day.